The autumn air was crisp, carrying the sweet scent of fallen leaves and the unmistakable chill that signaled the approach of Halloween. I had always found solace in my cabin, nestled deep within the shadowy pines of the Cascade Mountains. It was a place where I could escape the noise of the city, a sanctuary where I could breathe without the weight of deadlines and obligations. But as the sun dipped below the horizon on that fateful October evening, the isolation of my retreat took on a different tone. My faithful companion, Max, a golden retriever with a playful spirit, bounded around the cabin, his excitement infectious. I watched him through the window, his fur glowing like fire against the darkening woods. We had spent countless nights here, exploring the vast wilderness, but tonight felt different. A sense of unease washed over me as I prepared for Halloween, usually my favorite holiday. This year, however, there was a strange tension in the air, as if the forest itself held its breath. I remembered the stories I had heard about the Wendigo, the malevolent spirit of the forest that preyed on those who wandered too far into its domain. Legends told of its gaunt frame, long limbs, and a hunger that could never be satisfied. They said it would take on the guise of a lost soul, luring its victims deeper into the woods, far from the safety of their homes. I had always dismissed such tales as folklore, the imaginative ramblings of local storytellers, but as I glanced into the thickening darkness outside, a shiver crawled down my spine. That evening, as I prepared a simple meal of chili, the wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows of the cabin. The storm clouds rolled in, blotting out the moonlight, and I could feel the atmosphere shift, an almost electric tension filling the air. Max whimpered softly at the door, sensing my discomfort. I knelt beside him, scratching behind his ears. "It's just the wind, buddy. Nothing to worry about." But deep down, I knew something felt off. As night descended, I lit a fire in the hearth, the flames dancing and flickering shadows across the walls. I settled into my favorite armchair, a well-worn leather seat that had seen many winters, and pulled out a book of ghost stories to pass the time. The stories were filled with creatures of the night, phantoms, and things that go bump in the dark. I found myself glancing up often, half expecting to see something lurking just beyond the reach of the firelight. After a couple of hours, I glanced at the clock. It was nearly midnight. The wind picked up, rattling the cabin as Max shifted restlessly at my feet. "All right, let's take a quick look outside," I said, setting the book aside. I grabbed a flashlight and opened the door, the cool night air washing over me. The moon peeked through the clouds, casting an eerie glow on the clearing around the cabin. I scanned the area, my heart racing as I felt the weight of the woods pressing in on me. Max darted ahead, barking playfully at the rustling leaves, oblivious to the sense of foreboding that enveloped me. As I stepped off the porch, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. Something was out there, something watching. "Max, come," I called, my voice strained. The dog, sensing my tension, came trotting back, his tail tucked slightly between his legs. I felt a sudden urge to retreat back into the cabin, but a flicker of movement caught my eye, a flash of pale skin amidst the shadows. I turned the flashlight in that direction, my heart pounding as the beam of light illuminated a figure standing just beyond the tree line. It was tall, impossibly so, with limbs that seemed to stretch unnaturally. My breath hitched in my throat as I froze, realizing I was staring at a creature straight out of the legends. The Wendigo. It had sunken eyes that glinted with an otherworldly hunger, and its gaunt frame seemed to pulse with an insatiable craving. I couldn't move. The terror rooted me to the spot as the creature took a step forward. Max growled low in his throat, stepping protectively in front of me. "Go inside," I shouted, adrenaline surging through me. I grabbed Max's collar, yanking him back as I stumbled toward the door. My heart raced, and my mind screamed at me to run, to escape. But the Wendigo's gaze locked onto Max, and I felt an icy grip of fear. It wasn't just me it wanted, it was my dog. Slamming the door shut, I leaned against it, my heart pounding like a war drum. Max whined, pacing nervously at my feet, his instinct to protect me battling against his fear. I fumbled for the lock, my hands trembling as I secured the door. The wind howled outside, but it was no longer just the wind. I could hear something else, a low, guttural growl that reverberated through the wood. "What was that?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. Max pressed against me, seeking comfort. I could feel the heat radiating from his body, a reminder that I wasn't alone. I glanced at the windows, my breath catching in my throat, as I saw the pale figure shift just beyond the trees. It was watching, waiting. I grabbed my phone and dialed for help, but the call failed to connect. The signal was too weak this far into the mountains. Panic bubbled in my chest. I was completely cut off, and I had no idea how long this creature had been lurking outside. What did it want? In that moment, I remembered the stories, the Wendigo's insatiable hunger, the way it lured unsuspecting victims with the promise of safety. I couldn't let it trick me. "We have to stay quiet, Max," I whispered, dropping to my knees beside him. "We can't let it know we're here." I tried to think rationally, but the fear was overwhelming. I needed to protect Max. I scanned the cabin for something to defend us, anything that could be used as a weapon. My gaze landed on the fire poker by the hearth, and I grabbed it, holding it tightly. Minutes felt like hours as we sat in silence, the howling wind now punctuated by a low, haunting whistle that echoed through the trees. It was the Wendigo, I was sure of it. The sound curled around my mind, urging me to open the door, to step outside into the darkness where it waited. "Stay close," I murmured to Max, who was now sitting beside me, his ears perked and alert. The fire crackled, its warmth contrasting with the chill creeping in through the walls. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart, but every sound outside sent a jolt of fear through me. Suddenly, a loud thud echoed against the cabin, rattling the door. Max barked, and I gripped the poker tighter, ready to defend us against whatever was out there. "Quiet, buddy, you'll give away our position," I hissed, forcing him to sit back down. The thud came again, more insistent this time, followed by the sound of scratching, claws against wood. The Wendigo was testing the door, probing for weaknesses. I could almost feel its hunger pressing against the cabin walls, a palpable force that sought to break through. "Why are you doing this?" I shouted, my voice cracking. "What do you want?" But the only response was the relentless scratching, a reminder of the creature's unwavering persistence. As I crouched there, adrenaline coursing through me, I recalled an old folk remedy, a way to protect oneself against the Wendigo. It involved salt, believed to create a barrier that the creature couldn't cross. I quickly searched the cabin, my mind racing. The kitchen had salt, but I needed to act fast. "Stay here, Max," I whispered, though I knew he wouldn't listen. He followed me as I dashed to the kitchen, grabbing the salt shaker from the counter. I could feel the Wendigo's presence lurking just outside, its breath brushing against the cabin like a whisper of death. With trembling hands, I poured a line of salt across the threshold of the door, forming a protective barrier. "Please work," I whispered, hoping the old tales were true. I glanced back at the door, and my stomach dropped as I saw the Wendigo's gaunt silhouette shift just outside the window. It was looking in at me, its eyes glowing with hunger. My heart raced as I backed away from the door, clutching the fire poker like a lifeline. The creature outside seemed to sense my fear, its growls becoming more insistent, more desperate. I could feel its hunger, a gnawing void that sought to devour everything in its path. Max whined softly, his eyes wide and fearful. I needed a plan. The cabin had a small loft where I stored supplies. Perhaps I could barricade myself and Max there. With one last glance at the door, I turned and hurried toward the staircase, Max close behind. As I climbed the steps, the sound of scratching intensified, punctuated by the Wendigo's low, mournful wail. In the loft, I quickly pushed a heavy trunk against the door, creating a makeshift barricade. The sound of the Wendigo pounding against the cabin grew louder, shaking the walls. I felt a surge of panic as I grabbed more salt from the kitchen and poured it in a wide circle around the trunk, hoping to create a safe zone. "Stay close, Max," I whispered, trying to calm my own racing heart. The dog curled up beside me, his warm body a small comfort against the encroaching darkness. I could hear the Wendigo outside, the claws scratching relentlessly at the door, a constant reminder of its insatiable hunger. As the minutes turned into what felt like hours, the pounding suddenly stopped. A heavy silence enveloped the cabin, broken only by the crackling fire below. I strained to listen, my heart pounding in my ears. Was it gone, or was it simply waiting, watching? I edged closer to the window, peering out into the darkness. The moonlight bathed the clearing in a ghostly glow, but the Wendigo was nowhere to be seen. I felt a flicker of hope, but it was quickly extinguished as I noticed something in the snow just outside the cabin. A series of deep, elongated footprints leading away from the porch. "They're not human," I murmured, my voice trembling. The footprints were large and unnatural, a reminder that the creature was still lurking nearby, just out of sight. I took a step back, feeling the cold grip of dread settle in my stomach. Max lifted his head, ears perked as he sensed my tension. "It's okay, buddy," I whispered, trying to reassure us both. But deep down, I knew we weren't safe yet. I sat back against the trunk, the salt circle providing a small measure of comfort. I tried to calm my racing thoughts, but visions of the Wendigo filled my mind. Its sunken eyes, its haunting growl, the overwhelming hunger that radiated from it. I had read the stories, but nothing could prepare me for the reality of the creature lurking outside. Suddenly, a sound broke the silence, a soft, almost melodic whisper that floated through the air, echoing through the cabin. It was a voice, one that seemed both familiar and foreign, calling out to me, "Let me in." I froze, my heart hammering in my chest. The voice was deep and echoing, as if it were coming from the very depths of the forest itself. "Let me in," it repeated, the sound wrapping around me like a shroud. "Max, stay," I hissed, instinctively gripping the fire poker. I had to resist the temptation to respond, to open the door and step into the unknown. The Wendigo was trying to lure me out, to exploit my fear and vulnerability. The whispers grew louder, intertwining with the wind as the creature's growl echoed in the distance. "Let me in." "No," I shouted, my voice reverberating in the small loft. I pressed my hands over my ears, willing the voice to stop. It was a trap, I reminded myself, a trick designed to break my resolve. But as the minutes stretched into agonizing silence, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that clung to me. What if the Wendigo found a way in? What if the salt didn't hold? I needed to distract myself, to keep my mind from spiraling into despair. I rifled through my backpack, pulling out a flashlight in my old journal, hoping that writing would ground me. As I flipped open the pages, I began to write, pouring out my fear and frustration. Time blurred as I scribbled my thoughts, the only sound the scratching of claws against the wood and Max's soft whimpers. I described the Wendigo, its gaunt figure, the way it moved with an eerie grace, and the hunger that radiated from it like a palpable force. I wrote about the legends, the way they warned of the creature's cunning and insatiable appetite, and my growing realization that I was in a fight for my and Max's survival. Suddenly, a loud crash jolted me from my thoughts. I looked up, heart racing, as the trunk I had pushed against the door shook violently. The Wendigo had found a way in. Panic surged through me as I scrambled to my feet, gripping the fire poker tightly. "Max, come on," I shouted, pushing the trunk aside as the door buckled under the creature's weight. I poured more salt in a frenzied motion, hoping to reinforce the barrier, but the scratching had stopped, replaced by a low, guttural growl that echoed through the cabin, sending chills down my spine. The door splintered as the Wendigo's face emerged, pale and twisted, its eyes glowing with hunger. I swung the fire poker, barely grazing its bony fingers as it pulled back, howling in rage. The sound pierced my ears, a haunting reminder of the creature's insatiable desire. In that moment, instinct kicked in. I grabbed Max, pulling him close as I backed toward the window. "We need to go," I shouted, glancing for an escape route. The cabin was small, and the Wendigo was forcing its way inside. I spotted a window on the far side, just large enough for us to squeeze through. "Hold on tight," I urged Max, who seemed to sense my urgency as he pressed against my leg. I grabbed the fire poker and thrust it toward the Wendigo, buying us a few precious seconds as I lunged for the window. With a swift motion, I threw open the window and jumped, dragging Max along with me as we tumbled into the cold, damp earth outside. The night air hit me like a wall, but I didn't stop. I took off into the woods, the sounds of the Wendigo crashing through the cabin behind us echoing in my ears. The moon hung high above, casting a silvery light that illuminated the path ahead. Max ran beside me, his golden fur shining like a beacon in the darkness. We sprinted through the underbrush, branches slapping against my face, the chill of the air biting at my skin. But I couldn't stop. I had to keep moving, had to escape the creature that hunted us. As we fled deeper into the woods, the sounds of the Wendigo faded, replaced by the rustling leaves and the distant calls of night creatures. My breath came in ragged gasps, and I could feel the weight of fear pressing down on me. I had no idea where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stop. Not now. After what felt like an eternity, I slowed, glancing around to catch my breath. The woods were thick around us, shadows shifting in the moonlight. I crouched down, pulling Max close, and listened intently. "Did we lose it?" I whispered, my voice trembling. Max panted heavily, his eyes wide as he scanned the darkness. I could still feel the Wendigo's presence lingering just beyond the trees, waiting for the opportune moment to strike. Suddenly, I heard it. A distant, haunting whistle that echoed through the night, chilling me to the bone. It was calling, beckoning me to return. "Stay low, buddy," I whispered, clutching Max tightly. We couldn't afford to let the creature find us again. As I crouched there, the forest seemed to come alive with shadows, the moonlight casting eerie shapes that danced among the trees. I felt a deep, primal fear gnawing at my insides, a reminder of the legend I had dismissed so easily. The Wendigo was real, and it was hunting us. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours as I remained huddled in the underbrush with Max, listening to the forest and the chilling calls of the Wendigo. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed to find a way to protect myself and Max, to create a barrier between us and the creature that hunted us. After what felt like an eternity of silence, I began to inch away from our hiding place, carefully picking my way through the underbrush. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow on the landscape. I could still hear the Wendigo's distant calls, an insistent whisper that tugged at the corners of my mind. "We have to find somewhere safe," I whispered to Max, who trotted beside me, alert and watchful. "We can't stay out in the open." I scanned the surroundings, searching for any sign of shelter. As I moved deeper into the woods, I stumbled upon an old hunting shack, its weathered boards sagging under years of neglect. It was a remnant of a time long past, hidden away from prying eyes. I hesitated for a moment, but the familiar calls of the Wendigo urged me forward. This could be our refuge. I cautiously approached the shack, peering through the cracked windows. The interior was dark and musty, filled with dust and debris. I pushed the door open with a creak, stepping inside. The air was stale, carrying the scent of mildew and decay. Max hesitated at the threshold, sniffing the air as if sensing something I couldn't. "Come on, Max, we have to stay safe," I urged, motioning for him to follow me inside. He stepped in hesitantly, his instincts warning him of the unknown. Inside the shack, I quickly closed the door, pushing a heavy piece of furniture against it to reinforce our makeshift barrier. I glanced around, searching for anything I could use to defend us. Tools, weapons, anything. The dim light from the moon filtered through the grimy windows, illuminating old shelves lined with dusty supplies and rusted equipment. I found an old axe leaning against the wall and grabbed it, its weight reassuring in my hands. With Max at my side, I felt a flicker of hope. "This will have to do," I whispered, trying to calm the mounting fear. As I took inventory of the shack, the wind howled outside, a mournful wail that resonated through the cracks. I poured salt around the perimeter of the room, hoping it would provide a barrier against the Wendigo, just as I had done before. "Stay close, Max," I said, my voice steadying. But even as I fortified our shelter, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were still being watched. The wind whistled through the trees, a haunting melody that seemed to carry the Wendigo's presence. I couldn't let my guard down, not for a moment. The hours passed slowly, the shack creaking and groaning with the wind. Max lay curled up at my feet, his eyes flicking to the door every time a branch cracked outside. I sat on a rickety old chair, the axe resting on my lap, listening intently for any sign of the creature. Then, just as I began to think we might be safe, I heard it again, a soft, almost melodic whisper that floated through the air, wrapping around me like a shroud. "Let me in." I clenched the axe, heart racing as the Wendigo's voice echoed in my mind, pulling me closer to the edge of despair. "I won't open the door," I whispered defiantly. "You can't have us." The voice continued to call, insistent and seductive, promising safety and warmth. "Let me in." "Max, stay back," I shouted, pushing him away from the door as a panic surged through me. The creature was trying to get inside, to lure me into opening the door. The sound of scratching began again, claws raking against the wood, sending chills down my spine. "Let me in." My grip tightened on the axe as I backed away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. "You can't have us," I screamed, my voice hoarse with fear. Max whined softly, sensing my panic. I could feel the Wendigo's presence, a dark shadow pressing against the cabin, an insatiable hunger that sought to devour us whole. The scratching grew louder, punctuated by a low, menacing growl that sent shivers coursing through me. I poured more salt along the edges of the door, hoping it would hold. "Please, please, work," I whispered, desperation clawing at my throat. Then, with a sudden crash, the door splintered under the weight of the Wendigo's body. I stumbled back, raising the axe as the creature pushed its way inside. Its elongated limbs moved with a terrifying grace, the gaunt figure illuminated in the pale moonlight streaming through the windows. The hunger in its eyes was palpable, a void that demanded to be filled. "Stay back," I shouted, swinging the axe at the creature. The blade connected with its arm, but it was like striking stone. The Wendigo recoiled slightly, but its eyes glinted with amusement. It let out a chilling laugh, a sound that echoed through the shack and froze my blood. "Foolish human," it hissed, the voice reverberating in my mind. "You cannot escape your fate. I will take what is mine." In that moment, I realized the truth of the stories. The Wendigo wasn't just a creature, it was a manifestation of hunger and despair, a dark entity that thrived on fear. It could sense my weakness, my desperation, and it was reveling in it. "Get away from us," I screamed, lunging forward with the axe again, but the creature moved with unnatural speed, dodging my strike effortlessly. It was toying with me, playing a game it knew it would win. With a sudden burst of strength, the Wendigo surged forward, knocking me to the ground. I felt the weight of its body pressing down, the stench of decay filling my lungs as it leaned closer, its sunken eyes locking onto Max. "Your dog will be mine," it growled, its voice dripping with malice. I could feel my heart shattering as I realized the true extent of its hunger. The Wendigo wanted to consume not just my body, but the essence of my loyal companion. "No," I screamed, adrenaline fueling my panic. I forced myself to twist free, scrambling to my feet as the Wendigo lunged at Max, its long fingers stretching toward him. I swung the axe wildly, catching the creature's arm again, but it was too late. Max yelped, dodging to the side, and I felt a surge of determination. "Get away from him," I shouted, charging forward with the axe raised high. The Wendigo snarled, a sound that resonated deep within the cabin, shaking the very walls. But it hesitated, and I seized the moment. With every ounce of strength I had, I brought the axe down with all my might. The blade connected with a sickening thud, biting into the creature's shoulder. It howled in pain, the sound echoing through the night, a chorus of anguish that sent shivers down my spine. But I couldn't stop now. I could feel the Wendigo's fury rising, a dark wave of energy that threatened to consume us both. I needed to end this. With the Wendigo momentarily stunned, I pulled Max close, urging him to stay by my side. "We have to go, buddy, now," I shouted, my voice filled with urgency. I knew we couldn't stay here. The creature would recover, and we needed to find a way out of its clutches. I turned and bolted for the door, the axe clutched tightly in my hand. Max followed close behind, his golden fur a blur in the moonlight as we dashed toward the exit. The Wendigo roared behind us, a guttural sound of rage and desperation. I burst through the door and into the night, the cool air hitting me like a wave. The moon illuminated our path as we sprinted into the woods, adrenaline fueling our escape. I could hear the Wendigo crashing through the shack, its growls echoing through the trees as it pursued us. Faster, Max, I urged, my heart pounding as we plunged deeper into the forest. The branches snagged at my clothes, the underbrush pulling at my legs, but I didn't care. We had to keep moving. The Wendigo was relentless, its presence a dark shadow looming behind us. I could feel the weight of its hunger, a dark force that threatened to engulf us. I needed to find a way to deter it, to protect Max from its insatiable appetite. I remembered the stories, the salt, the barriers, the ways to fend off the creature. But I had already used the salt in the cabin. I needed to find something else, something that could keep us safe. As we ran, I spotted a glimmer of light in the distance, a small clearing illuminated by the moon. Hope surged within me as I headed toward it, pulling Max along. We might find something there, I shouted, desperation lacing my voice. The Wendigo's growls grew louder, a chilling reminder of the danger closing in on us. I pushed forward, my breath coming in ragged gasps as we reached the clearing, but what I saw sent a jolt of fear through me. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone altar, weathered and covered in moss. It felt as though it had been here for centuries, a remnant of a time long past. The ground around it was barren, devoid of the usual underbrush, as if it were a sacred space. Max, stay close, I whispered, my heart racing. I had no idea what this place was, but it felt significant. I dropped to my knees beside the altar, searching for anything that could help us. As I examined the stones, I noticed strange markings etched into the surface, symbols I didn't recognize but felt deeply familiar. They spoke of protection, of ancient rituals designed to ward off evil. Please, let this work, I murmured, desperation clawing at my throat. I glanced back toward the trees, fear gripping my heart as I caught sight of the Wendigo emerging from the shadows, its eyes glowing with fury. Let me in, it whispered, its voice echoing through the clearing, chilling me to the bone. It was trying to lure me in again, to break my resolve, but I wouldn't give in. I grabbed a handful of dirt and scattered it over the altar, whispering a silent plea for protection. I needed to create a barrier, something to keep the Wendigo at bay. The air crackled with energy, and the markings on the altar began to glow faintly. Max, get behind me, I shouted, positioning myself in front of the altar. The Wendigo lunged forward, its claws outstretched, a howl of rage escaping its lips. I felt the weight of its hunger pressing down on me, but I wouldn't let it take us. With a surge of determination, I raised the axe, aiming it at the creature. You can't have us. We won't be your prey, I shouted, my voice echoing through the clearing. The Wendigo paused, its eyes narrowing as the markings on the altar flared to life. A wave of energy pulsed through the air, and I felt a surge of power course through me. It was as if the forest itself was responding, creating a barrier between us and the creature. No, it howled, its voice a cacophony of rage and desperation. It surged forward, but the energy from the altar pushed back, creating a force field that held the creature at bay. Stay back, I shouted, my voice filled with defiance. I could feel the Wendigo's hunger clashing against the protective barrier, its claws raking against the invisible wall. The air shimmered with energy, and I focused on the markings, willing them to strengthen. I could feel the connection to the ancient power coursing through me, and I knew I had to hold on. The Wendigo howled again, thrashing against the barrier. You cannot escape, it snarled, the hunger in its eyes intensifying. I will consume you. No, I shouted back, my resolve hardening. We will not be your prey. With a final surge of energy, I thrust the axe forward, channeling my fear and determination into the swing. The blade struck the altar, and the markings glowed brighter, the energy swirling around us like a tempest. The Wendigo shrieked, the sound piercing the night as the energy enveloped it, pushing it back into the shadows. You cannot defy me, it howled, but its voice was fading, the power of the altar forcing it away. I felt the weight of the Wendigo's hunger lifting, the darkness receding as the creature was pushed back. It struggled against the barrier, but I held my ground, refusing to let it take us. With one final, desperate cry, the Wendigo vanished into the darkness, the air falling silent. I stood there, breathless, the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I felt the remnants of the creature's presence fade away. Max pressed against my leg, panting heavily. I dropped to my knees, pulling him close. We did it, buddy, I whispered, my voice trembling with relief. We're safe. The moon shone brightly overhead, casting a gentle light over the clearing. I could still feel the remnants of fear and adrenaline coursing through me, but in that moment, I knew we had triumphed. We had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. Epilogue: The journey forward. As dawn broke over the horizon, the first rays of sunlight spilled into the clearing, chasing away the shadows of the night. I stood at the altar, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. The Wendigo had been banished, at least for now, and we had survived. Max sat beside me, his golden fur glowing in the morning light. I reached down to scratch behind his ears, gratitude swelling in my chest. "We made it, buddy," I said softly, my voice filled with emotion. But I knew the fight wasn't over. The Wendigo was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next opportunity. I had to remain vigilant, to protect myself and Max from the darkness that could return at any moment. As I gathered my thoughts, I looked back at the altar, the markings still faintly glowing in the sunlight. I felt a connection to the ancient power that had saved us, a reminder of the strength that lay within the forest. With a deep breath, I turned and began the journey back through the woods, Max by my side. We would find our way home, but I knew that my life had changed forever. The stories were real, and the darkness was ever present. But I also knew that I was stronger than I had ever realized. I had faced the Wendigo and emerged victorious, and I would continue to fight against the shadows that threatened to engulf me. Together, we would forge a new path, one filled with hope and resilience. The forest was alive with possibility, and I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead.